Nearly everyone recognizes Josef Mengele as the face of Nazi medical horror. But while Mengele chose who lived and who died on the Auschwitz ramp, another doctor at Dachau engineered death with a stopwatch, backed personally by Heinrich Himmler. He drowned and suffocated hundreds of prisoners to produce data for the Luftwaffe. Rascher's experiments were not random cruelty. They were sanctioned and systematic, aimed at answering specific military questions. Death was the data point. So why do most people remember Mengele and not the doctor who turned science into an industrial killing machine? Sigmund Rascher's rise inside the Nazi medical system was no accident. His access to human test subjects at Dachau was secured through a direct line to the highest levels of the SS. Rascher's wife Caroline Adele used her personal connections to Heinrich Himmler to champion her husband's ambitions. In April 1939, Himmler met Rascher on Adele's recommendation, setting in motion a partnership that would bypass normal medical oversight. By 1941, Rascher was a trained physician and Luftwaffe captain, but it was Himmler's patronage that transformed him into an SS doctor with special privileges. Official documents show the machinery of approval. In May 1942, Rascher sent a letter to Himmler arguing that animal experiments for high-altitude flight were insufficient and that only human trials could answer the Luftwaffe's questions, even if it meant certain death for the subjects. Himmler's adjutant Rudolf Brandt replied with a memo authorizing the transfer of prisoners to Dachau for Rascher's use. Brandt's letters, stamped with Himmler's authority, gave Rascher unrestricted access to camp inmates, shielding him from interference by the Luftwaffe's own medical hierarchy or the Reich Research Council. This arrangement was not hidden. Himmler personally attended some of Rascher's sessions and received regular reports. Rascher's requests for more prisoners or for secrecy were met with swift approval. By early 1942, every administrative barrier had been removed. Rascher operated with the full protection of the SS, his experiments classified as matters of state security. This institutional pipeline ensured that no outside authority could question the source of his test subjects or the purpose of his work. It was this shield that allowed Rascher to launch programs that would soon become some of the most lethal in the Third Reich. Rows of prisoners at Dachau were stripped naked and selected for Rascher's first wave of experiments. The setup was precise. Men were immersed in tanks filled with ice water, their bodies monitored by electrodes and temperature probes. Some lasted only a few minutes before losing consciousness. Others survived for hours, shivering and gasping, while Rascher's team recorded every detail. In the most extreme cases, subjects remained submerged for up to 3 hours. For outdoor trials, prisoners were forced to lie exposed on the ground in winter, sometimes left for 14 hours as snow collected around their bodies. Every minute was logged, including core temperature, pulse, breathing, the time at which shivering stopped, and the instant life faded. Rascher insisted on immediate autopsy. As soon as death was declared, the body was carried to a nearby table, still warm, and dissected to examine the effects of cold on vital organs. The results were tabulated and sent directly to the Luftwaffe. Death was not a byproduct, it was the end point. Data was valued above the lives lost. Rascher's notes show no hesitation, only the search for a precise answer to how long a pilot might survive in the North Sea. Each number, each measurement came at the cost of a human being, reduced to a data point in a ledger. The clinical routine of these killings left no room for doubt. This was science turned into a weapon, and the victims were never meant to return. In the spring of 1942, a new apparatus arrived at Dachau, a portable low-pressure chamber engineered to mimic the deadly extremes of high-altitude flight. Rascher and his team sealed prisoners inside and began reducing the air pressure, watching as oxygen levels plummeted to those found at 40,000 feet. The process was clinical and tightly controlled. Prisoners gasped for air, lost consciousness, and suffered catastrophic organ failure. Most died within minutes. Of the 200 men subjected to these decompression trials, 80 lost their lives either during the experiment or immediately after. Rascher insisted on immediate autopsy, dissecting bodies before tissue changes could obscure the effects of altitude on the heart, lungs, and brain. The purpose was never in doubt. Each test was designed to answer precise questions from the Luftwaffe's Aviation Medicine Division. How long could a pilot survive if his cockpit depressurized at altitude? What symptoms would appear in the final moments? Rascher kept meticulous records, noting time to unconsciousness and time to death, and charting the sequence of physiological collapse. Luftwaffe medical officers, including Heinrich Himmler and Siegfried Ruff, attended some of these trials or reviewed the data firsthand. In late October 1942, Rascher presented his findings at a closed Luftwaffe medical conference in Nuremberg. His report, co-signed by Holzlohner and Finke, laid out the fatal timelines and autopsy results. The data was not just archived, it was actively discussed by military doctors seeking to refine survival protocols for German pilots. Rascher's experiments, sanctioned at the highest levels, delivered lethal answers directly to the heart of the Nazi war machine. Sigmund Rascher's legacy is measured not by spectacle, but by the cold arithmetic of bureaucracy, where Josef Mengele's crimes became infamous through survivor stories and public manhunts. Rascher's victims vanished into official ledgers. His experiments killed between 300 and 400 prisoners at Dachau, yet almost none are remembered by name. Each death was recorded as a data point: body temperature, time to unconsciousness, organ failure. The measurements were fed into a system that valued results above all else. The funding trail ran straight from the Luftwaffe's medical division to Himmler's office, with every resource provided on demand. Rascher's reports were not hidden in secret files. They were circulated among military planners, dissected at conferences, and cited in technical memos. The victims were Poles, Soviets, and others stripped of identity, reduced to statistics in a regime obsessed with efficiency. Unlike Mengele, who operated within the chaos of Auschwitz, Rascher's work functioned as an extension of the war machine. His killings were not the actions of a rogue sadist, but the output of a system designed to turn suffering into operational knowledge. The absence of names in his records is its own form of cruelty. No stories, no graves, only numbers. Every experiment was authorized, every death accounted for, every result delivered to the authorities who demanded them. In Rascher's world, the machinery of murder ran smoothly, and the human cost was meant to be invisible. The true horror lies in the way the system erased its victims, making their deaths both inevitable and unremarkable. By 1944, Sigmund Rascher's career had collapsed under a scandal that had nothing to do with murder. His wife, Caroline Diehl, claimed to possess miraculous fertility and presented a string of newborns as proof. The truth unraveled when police and Gestapo investigators traced the infants to kidnappings and illegal adoptions. Rascher and Diehl had orchestrated a fraud. They smuggled at least 7 infants into their household and passed them off as their own to impress Himmler and to qualify for Nazi family awards. Suspicious deaths and disappearances of some of these children drew further attention. The couple was then implicated in document forgery and the murder of a lab assistant who threatened to expose them. The regime's response was swift. Himmler, once Rascher's protector, withdrew all support. In May 1944, Rascher was arrested and sent first to Buchenwald, then returned to Dachau as a prisoner. No charges referenced his role in the deaths of hundreds at the camp. Instead, the focus rested entirely on the embarrassment his family fraud brought to the SS. Caroline Diehl was sentenced to death and later hanged at Ravensbrück. On April 26, 1945, as the Third Reich disintegrated, Rascher's story ended in the same place where he had conducted his experiments. An SS officer carrying out Himmler's order shot Rascher through the door of his cell at Dachau. Witnesses reported the guard spat on the body and called him a pig. The Nazi system that had shielded Rascher for years destroyed him not for mass murder, but for the crime of making the SS look foolish. In the end, the regime punished embarrassment, not atrocity. When lethal science becomes state policy, the real horror lies in what is authorized, not just what is remembered. Today, governments still debate ethical boundaries in medicine and warfare. The legacy of Rascher's experiments warns that unchecked power can turn human lives into data points. History only forgives what we choose to forget.